My parents had declared my entire existence off limits to anyone outside our immediate family, labeling all strangers as a toxic presence. When I confided in my father that I could interpret for a hearing-impaired witness who'd seen a hit-and-run tragedy, his grip tightened on my shoulders as he declared, "Our lives remain separate from the world's entanglements." I broke free, silent. That was over a year ago. Just last week, he watched me on the nightly news. Growing up, my parents had educated me at home, forbidding any contact with those beyond our household. I genuinely believed everyone lived as we did. During their rare trips for supplies, Ramona Lang and I would wait in our parked vehicle, doors secured, windows sealed. If anyone passed by, we were to keep our eyes fixed on our laps. Direct gaze with outsiders was strictly prohibited. My mother insisted that strangers would corrupt our minds, a sentiment my father reinforced with verses from sacred scriptures, emphasizing our need to remain distinct from the wider world. The only voices I ever conversed with were those of my parents and my younger sister, Ramona Lang. This rigid doctrine stifled any hope of normal personal growth. By the time I turned 18, I was barely capable of functioning during mandatory state assessments. A proctor might pose a straightforward query, and I'd lock up entirely. My hands would tremble, and sweat would bead on my forehead, tracing paths down my face. The sole non-family member I observed with any regularity was our postal carrier, Alden Croft. He appeared like clockwork, precisely at 2 each afternoon, every single day. He was 13 years my senior, yet I found myself constructing elaborate fantasies of a shared life. Such were the byproducts of profound solitude. One day, he caught my gaze. Instead of alerting my parents, he simply smiled and waved, as if it were the most natural thing. I instantly recoiled, a wave of terror washing over me, but he merely continued his route, unperturbed. The following day, he waved again. After a week of this, his hand movements shifted. No longer a simple wave, but something more intricate. Initially, I wondered if he had some physical condition, but then understanding dawned. He would point to our sprawling oak, then unfurl his fingers upwards like burgeoning branches. He'd gesture at his mail vehicle, then clench his fists, pumping them forward as if driving. He was teaching me an entire clandestine lexicon through the glass, and I became utterly captivated. This continued for months. Alden would linger an extra minute or two by our mailbox, demonstrating news signs. I practiced incessantly in my room. Ramona Lang once discovered me, and I shared the secret with her too. We'd engage in silent debates, exchange jokes, and whisper secrets, all in perfect quiet. My parents never suspected. So adept had we become at freezing into stillness the moment we detected approaching footsteps. They even commended us during dinner one evening on how our constant squabbling had ceased. One Tuesday afternoon, my world shattered. I was refining signs in my room when a jarring screech of tires sliced through the quiet. Then came that sickening thud, that unmistakable, wrong kind of impact that instantly signals disaster. I bolted to the window, my mind struggling to process the scene. A small figure soared through the air. A little boy, no older than 6, landed with a violent impact on the asphalt as a pristine white sedan sped away. A dark pool of blood began to spread beneath his head. People began to shriek, rushing towards him. I pressed my face against the pane so hard it left imprints, desperate to discern any movement from his chest. It was then I noticed a woman, utterly immobile, on the pavement's edge. Her hands moved frantically, pointing and gesturing towards the fleeing car, yet she might as well have been invisible. No one understood her. She kept forming letters and numbers, but everyone merely gawked, as if witnessing a public breakdown. A tremor ran through me as the realization struck. She had seen the license plate, she knew the culprit. She was trying to communicate, but her words were imprisoned within her hands. The boy remained unmoving. Someone was shouting about dialing emergency services. The hearing-impaired woman, Daria Sayed, repeated the same sequence relentlessly. BR 7492. She had witnessed the plate, but lacked the means to convey it. I recognized those signs. Alden had taught me digits and the alphabet just last month. My parents' directives roared in my ears, but that young boy was dying. There was no time for fear. I sprinted downstairs where my mother was instructing Ramona Lang in the intricacies of herbal remedies. "There's been an incident," I gasped. "A hit and run. A child was struck." My mother stiffened, her posture instantly shifting into lockdown. "Remain indoors. Do not venture out." She moved towards the window, and I knew the moment her gaze fell upon the gathering crowd, we would be confined for days. "Mother, please. There's a hearing-impaired witness. She saw the vehicle's registration, but no one comprehends her. I know hand language. I can assist." The words tumbled out of me in a desperate torrent. "You know what? How could you possibly possess that knowledge?" Her expression contorted. Confusion, then dawning comprehension, then pure, unadulterated rage. "Have you been engaging with outsiders?" My father emerged swiftly from his study. "What is transpiring?" Through the glass we could discern paramedics arriving. The boy, Leo Kane, was so terribly still, too still. Daria Sayed was weeping now, her signs becoming more erratic, more desperate, still striving to reach anyone who would meet her gaze. "Your daughter has been secretly acquiring a silent language," my mother spat. "She wishes to converse with strangers." "Please," I cried. "That boy is fading, and she saw who did it. No one else can understand her. Please let me help." My father seized my shoulders with crushing force. "You have deliberately defied us. You have endangered this entire family with contamination." His fingers dug into my flesh. "We are not involved in worldly affairs." I tore myself from his grasp and bolted for the exit. My mother's shriek echoed behind me, but I didn't falter. I burst into the sunlight for the first time in years without permission. The warmth felt alien on my skin. Heads turned as I ran barefoot across our lawn. Daria Saeed saw my approach and began signing furiously. I signed back, "I comprehend you." Her eyes widened. "Vehicle registration," she signed. "BR7492, white sedan. Michigan plates." I spun towards the nearest adult. The words felt cumbersome on my tongue after years of silence. "BR7492, white sedan. Michigan plates." I managed to articulate to a nearby officer, who immediately grabbed his radio, relaying the details as paramedics worked on Leo Kane's motionless form. Daria Saeed grasped my hands, signing "thank you" repeatedly, tears streaming down her face, as more police vehicles arrived and officers began collecting statements. I stood there, trembling, as the gravity of my actions crashed down. I had just shattered every single rule my parents had ever imposed. But Leo Kane was being loaded into an ambulance, and that outweighed everything else. My mother yanked me back inside with such force, my shoulder felt a sharp pop. And my father slammed the door shut behind us while Ramona Lang watched from the staircase, her eyes enormous. They subjected me to a 20-minute tirade about defilement and rebellion, about how I had corrupted our family's sanctity. Yet, all I could visualize was Leo Kane's blood spreading on the pavement. The subsequent 3 weeks dissolved into a haze of retribution and confinement. They revoked my window access and mandated I transcribe ancient philosophical texts for 12 hours daily, while news vans congregated outside our residence because, somehow, word had spread that a homeschooled girl had helped resolve a hit and run. Daria Saeed somehow acquired my contact information and began sending me updates on Leo Kane, who had survived, though with severe cranial trauma requiring years of rehabilitation. She also mentioned his mother, Lorelei West, was desperate for answers as law enforcement claimed they couldn't locate the vehicle with those plates. That's when everything shifted. We were packing possessions for our punitive relocation to a smaller dwelling when I noticed our new neighbor, Maura Prescott, had surveillance cameras lining her driveway, positioned directly towards the thoroughfare where Leo Kane had been struck. I communicated about the cameras to Ramona Lang using signs, feigning to arrange dishware, and she immediately grasped the potential implication for the investigation. 2 days into the move, Ramona Lang suddenly doubled over, screaming and clutching her abdomen as we moved boxes. When she cried out about appendix discomfort, my mother's face drained of color, their medical knowledge stemming solely from antiquated volumes. My father finally consented to take her to the emergency room after she began writhing on the floor. I watched their vehicle speed away, knowing Ramona Lang was executing the deception flawlessly. The instant their car rounded the corner, I dialed Daria Saeed and informed her about Maura Prescott's cameras. She assured me she'd arrive in 15 minutes with assistance. A van pulled up, and Daria Saeed emerged with a tall man who introduced himself as Thane Ward, Leo Kane's uncle, an IT professional. They followed me to where I could indicate Maura Prescott's residence from our window. Thane Ward produced a laptop and began typing rapidly, explaining he could access cloud storage if we were close enough to her wireless network. Daria Saeed maintained watch while I stood there, my heart thrumming against my ribs. We crept along the side of Maura Prescott's house, where Thane Ward established a connection to her network. His fingers danced across the keyboard, retrieving file after file of surveillance footage from the past month. I leaned over his shoulder as he scrolled through timestamps and suddenly froze when Alden Croft's postal vehicle appeared on screen from 3 weeks before the incident, with Maura Prescott cornering him by her car, jabbing a finger in his face. The timestamp advanced to the day of the incident, and my stomach plummeted as we observed Maura Prescott seated in her white sedan at 1:47 p.m., sipping from a wine bottle while holding up her phone, recording herself laughing at something. Thane Ward saved everything to 3 distinct drives, while Daria Saeed observed the footage of Maura Prescott clearly intoxicated just 13 minutes before she struck Leo Kane. We all knew this changed everything. We heard a car approaching, and I sprinted back inside just as my parents' vehicle pulled into the driveway with Ramona Lang, who gave me the faintest thumbs up while my mother ranted about incompetent medical practitioners who found nothing amiss. That night, Thane Ward sent me files that made my stomach drop because there were 2 other children struck by white sedans in the past 3 years. Both cases had gone cold after Sheriff Preston took over the investigations. The following morning, 3 dark SUVs entered our driveway, and federal agents surrounded our house while my father frantically attempted to secure all entrances. But they possessed warrants. They escorted us all into the living room where an agent explained that Sheriff Preston had been concealing his wife's impaired driving for years, and Leo Kane was not her first victim. What truly mystified me was how Alden Croft had spontaneously devised this intricate system of hand gestures. Had he always intended to impart a language through a window? My hands trembled as I realized we had stumbled upon something far more extensive than a single accident. The doorbell chimed, and Daria Saeed entered with Alden Croft directly behind her. Seeing him without the barrier of glass felt like stepping into another dimension. He signed and spoke concurrently, telling me I had saved his career and secured justice for Leo Kane, while my parents sat rigid, refusing even to glance at them. The agent clarified that Ramona Lang and I would need to testify before a grand jury regarding all we had witnessed and documented. My parents remained unyielding in their seats, as if attempting to merge with the furniture. The front door opened again, and Thane Ward entered with a woman whose eyes were red and swollen from weeping. Lorelei West walked directly to me, tears streaming, and enveloped me in her arms, whispering, "Thank you for speaking up when no one else would listen." It was the first embrace I had ever received from someone outside my immediate family, and my entire body stiffened, unsure how to respond. My father abruptly rose, announcing our departure, asserting no one could compel us to remain. But the agent produced additional documents. He explained that Ramona Lang and I were under federal protection until the trial, and Child Protective Services had been informed of our isolated upbringing. My mother's face paled as the agent stated we would be placed in temporary foster care while CPS investigated our living conditions. 2 days later, Ramona Lang and I sat in Daria Saeed's kitchen as she demonstrated proper cell phone usage. Every mundane activity felt impossible. Ordering from a menu or conversing with a cashier at a store. Ramona Lang quickly adapted, already playing with the neighborhood children, while I observed from the window, still hesitant to venture outside without explicit consent. At night, I found sleep elusive in a room without locks. The newfound freedom felt wrong, as if my very existence was a transgression. Daria Saeed attempted to teach me fundamental social skills, like introducing myself or engaging in casual conversation, but my mind would consistently freeze. 3 weeks later, we were in a spacious room with wood-paneled walls as I testified for 3 hours about the silent language and the discovery of the surveillance footage. My voice gained strength with each answer, and Ramona Lang testified about how we had never been permitted to leave the house or speak to anyone. The grand jury voted to indict both Sheriff Preston and Maura Prescott on multiple charges, including obstruction of justice and vehicular manslaughter. The next morning, law enforcement vehicles encircled Maura Prescott's residence while neighbors gathered on their lawns to observe. She shrieked that those terrorist children were fabricating stories and framing her as they fastened handcuffs. At the police station, other officers watched in silence as Sheriff Preston was apprehended at his own desk. News cameras captured every moment as he was led away in restraints, his former colleagues refusing even to meet his gaze. Over the subsequent weeks, our lives underwent a complete transformation. Ramona Lang began attending a conventional school for the first time and discovered a remarkable aptitude for argumentation. She joined the debate team after just 2 weeks and triumphed in her inaugural competition by month's end. The coach approached me privately after observing her dismantle 3 seniors in practice rounds. He remarked that she possessed a natural talent most adolescents never cultivate. Ramona Lang later confided that years of silent disagreements with me had uniquely honed her intellect. She could instantaneously perceive multiple perspectives and formulate counter-arguments before her opponent completed their point. Meanwhile, our parents occupied separate detention cells, awaiting their own legal proceedings. My father requested a supervised visit with us after 3 weeks of incarceration. We sat opposite him in a small, stark room while a social worker observed from a corner. His hands trembled as he regarded us, and I noted the significant weight he had already lost. He confessed he had failed as a parent and allowed fear to dominate our entire family. He claimed my mother's paranoia had insidiously infected him over the years until he could no longer discern the profound error of it all. My mother declined to meet with us, still convinced she had committed no wrongdoing. The prosecutor overseeing the Prescott case summoned me for another meeting that same week. She shared news that made my stomach churn. My parents were under investigation by the state for child abuse and educational neglect. The prosecutor stated Ramona Lang and I might also have to testify against them. Everything seemed to worsen instead of improve. Daria Saeed began visiting us at the group home twice weekly to assist me in preparing for my general education development examination. She brought study guides and sat with me for hours, reviewing mathematics and science I had never properly learned. She consistently affirmed my brilliance, insisting my parents could not halt my intellectual growth even confined within that house. The examination itself proved easier than anticipated. With her dedicated assistance, my scores were sufficiently high for college admission, a prospect that had seemed utterly unattainable given my starting point. Daria Saeed embraced me so tightly upon receiving the results that I momentarily struggled for breath. 3 months after Leo Kane's passing, his mother, Lorelei West, inquired if I wished to visit his memorial with her. I was uncertain if I could endure it, but something compelled me to assent. We stood in the cemetery as she recounted stories of her son. He had been learning hand language at school to communicate with his hearing-impaired cousin residing in California. The sheer coincidence struck me so forcefully, I had to sit down on the grass. This young boy who had died had been acquiring the very language that had liberated me. Lorelei West showed me videos on her phone of him practicing his signs, his tiny face etched with intense concentration. The trial finally commenced 6 months after that dreadful day. The courthouse was thronged with reporters and indignant neighbors who had known the Prescotts for years. I took the stand on the first day, feeling stronger than ever before. Months of therapy had helped me discover my voice, though my hands still trembled. Maura Prescott's counsel attempted to portray me as deranged due to my upbringing. He repeatedly questioned my genuine comprehension of what I had witnessed, given my lifelong isolation. The prosecutor objected repeatedly while I maintained my composure, recounting the events with precise detail. I described everything, from the white sedan speeding away to Daria Saeed signing the vehicle's registration number. The jury observed me intently. I noticed them making notes. Alden Croft testified the following day about teaching me hand language through the window. He explained how Maura Prescott had repeatedly threatened him for communicating with our family. The prosecutor presented surveillance footage from the liquor store depicting Maura Prescott purchasing wine 20 minutes prior to the accident. Then came the social media video her friend had uploaded, showing them taking shots in her kitchen an hour before Leo Kane died. The jury appeared visibly distressed watching it, especially when the timestamp appeared on screen. Ramona Lang remained in the gallery throughout, silently signing encouragement to me whenever our eyes met. Our secret language, so long concealed, was instrumental in imprisoning a killer. Even my mother observed from her seat in the back row, and I witnessed a subtle shift in her expression when Ramona Lang signed, "I love you" to me. Maura Prescott took the stand on day 3, asserting I was fabricating because my parents had indoctrinated me to despise ordinary Americans. She claimed we were extremists who sought to dismantle good, wholesome families like hers. The prosecutor systematically dismantled her testimony with surveillance footage from the intersection, clearly showing her vehicle disregarding the red light. The video was so distinct, one could discern her looking at her phone rather than the road. Then came the evidence of her husband's attempts to conceal everything. The prosecutor possessed hundreds of electronic communications between Sheriff Preston and other officers regarding altered reports. He had also intimidated 3 different police officers who wished to investigate properly and had destroyed the original accident report. The conspiracy extended all the way to the deputy chief, who had been accepting bribes for years. During the lunch recess, I found myself in the witness waiting room with 3 other individuals who had all previously attempted to report Maura Prescott. The first gentleman showed me his police report from 6 months prior when she had sideswiped his car while intoxicated at midday. Law enforcement never followed up. The second woman possessed dash camera footage of Maura Prescott running a red light and nearly striking a family in a crosswalk. She had submitted it to the police department 4 times. The third person was an elderly man whose granddaughter attended school with Leo Kane. He had complained to the principal about Maura Prescott picking up her own children while overtly inebriated, but no action was taken. We all sat there, realizing that if anyone had listened to us, Leo Kane would still be alive. When court resumed for closing arguments, the prosecutor rose and pointed directly at me. He lauded me as a hero who had broken free from confinement to preserve lives. He stated my courage had exposed not merely one impaired driver, but an entire corrupt system. The defense attorney endeavored to portray me as a manipulated child seeking validation. She asserted I was confused and traumatized by my upbringing. She claimed Daria Saeed had coached me to lie for sympathy. Every word felt like a physical blow, but I kept my gaze fixed on the photograph of Leo Kane displayed on the evidence table. That young boy deserved justice, regardless of their assertions about me. The jury retired to deliberate, and we all exited the courtroom. In the corridor, I found myself standing beside a girl approximately my age. She introduced herself as Anya Ward, Thane Ward's daughter. Her father was the witness who tried to aid Leo Kane. We began discussing ordinary topics like higher education and career aspirations. She was attending Michigan State for engineering. I informed her I had applied to the University of Michigan for social work. It struck me that I could actually envision a future now. I could see myself attending classes, forming friendships, and living a conventional life. The jury required 2 full days to reach a decision. Daria Saeed kept Ramona Lang and me occupied with culinary lessons, shopping excursions, and movie nights. We prepared homemade pizza, watched comedies, and painted our nails. Leo Kane learning hand language to communicate with his hearing-impaired cousin, while the same language ultimately exposed his killer. That's the kind of narrative twist that makes one believe the universe possesses a profoundly dark sense of humor. Daria Saeed was constructing a new kind of family for us from the ground up. We were learning how to navigate life as typical adolescents. On the second afternoon, the bailiff summoned us back. The courtroom was packed. Maura Prescott sat there, appearing small and terrified, while her husband, Sheriff Preston, merely stared at the table. The judge inquired if the jury had reached a verdict. The foreman stood and declared, yes, guilty on all counts for Maura Prescott. 25 years for vehicular homicide, driving under the influence, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. Guilty on all counts for Sheriff Preston. 20 years for corruption, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. The courtroom erupted. People were crying and cheering simultaneously. Lorelei West, Leo Kane's mother, collapsed into her seat, sobbing with relief. I went over and held her as she wept. She clutched my hands and whispered that I had brought Leo Kane justice. Across the room, Alden Croft was signing to me from the gallery. You found your voice, his hands articulated. Outside the courthouse, reporters immediately swarmed us. Cameras and microphones pressed towards my face from every direction. I froze initially, my old conditioning kicking in. Then I recalled I no longer had to remain silent. I looked directly into the cameras and spoke clearly. A child perished because adults failed him. I merely spoke the truth. My voice did not waver in the slightest. A week later, we sat in a Child Protective Services office as they read their final determination. My parents would need to complete extensive counseling and parenting courses before any unsupervised contact with us. Ramona Lang and I would remain with Daria Saeed indefinitely. My mother and father sat opposite us, looking utterly defeated. They had initially contested it, but their legal counsel advised them they would lose. The following day, a thick envelope arrived from the University of Michigan. Daria Saeed and Ramona Lang watched as I opened it. A full scholarship based on my GED scores and extraordinary circumstances. They desired for me to study social work to assist other confined children. I had detailed my experiences in my application essay. Ramona Lang embraced me so tightly, I momentarily struggled to breathe. 2 weeks later, we had our first supervised visit with our parents. The social worker sat in the corner, taking notes while we conversed. My mother appeared different somehow, diminished. She began crying halfway through, and for the first time in my life, she admitted her error. I was so terrified of the world harming you that I inflicted harm myself, she confessed. My father nodded beside her. They had been attending therapy 3 times a week. The therapist was helping them comprehend how their fear had transmuted into mistreatment. It was merely the initial step, but it was progress. 3 weeks later, I located Alden Croft on his postal route 2 blocks from our former residence, and my hands trembled as I approached him for the first time without the barrier of glass. He looked up from sorting letters, and his entire countenance broke into a vast smile that made me realize how much he had been concerned for me since everything transpired. "You saved my life once," I told him, and watched him immediately shake his head. "You saved your own life. I merely showed you a window existed." He pulled me into a brief embrace that smelled of mail truck vinyl and aftershave before returning to his work. And I stood there on the pavement, feeling as though perhaps I could genuinely navigate this whole existing in the world thing. Ramona Lang's debate tournament occurred 4 months later, and watching her stand at that podium, arguing about religious liberty versus child welfare, sent a delicious ache through my chest. My mother and father sat 3 rows behind me, and I could discern my mother's hands twisted together in her lap as Ramona Lang explained how confinement is not protection, and how faith should not necessitate severing oneself from humanity. The judges awarded her first place, and when she walked off that stage, my father actually stood and applauded, though his expression suggested he was wrestling with profound internal conflict. Community college commenced that autumn, and I selected morning classes, believing fewer individuals would be present. But the parking lot was still packed at 7:30, and I sat in my vehicle for 20 minutes before finally venturing into the building. The initial few weeks were arduous, and I would seek out quiet spaces in empty corridors between classes just to breathe. But by December, I had cultivated 2 friendships with individuals who did not mind my occasional silences or my need to step outside when rooms became too crowded. Thane Ward, the family therapist, had all of us in his office every Thursday. Those sessions were challenging, with my father admitting he had weaponized faith to control us, and my mother weeping about how her own childhood trauma had led her to believe walls were the sole means of ensuring our safety. Rebuilding trust would demand years, but at least we were conversing now, instead of merely adhering to unquestioned directives. 6 months after the trial, Daria Saeed inquired if I wished to volunteer at the Deaf Advocacy Center. That first day, teaching hand language to other isolated teenagers felt like a complete circle. This girl, Solana Thorne, arrived with the same terrified expression I likely wore that day I ran outside. And when she signed "thank you" after our session, I had to excuse myself to the restroom to compose myself. Daria Saeed found me there and simply held me while I processed that perhaps something good could indeed emerge from all the suffering. Leo Kane's elementary school invited us to the Memorial Garden dedication, and seeing that engraved block proclaiming justice through truth, while his classmates sang a song about companionship, made Ramona Lang squeeze my hand so tightly it ached. We stood there as part of the community for the first time, and no one stared at us as if we were peculiar or different. And his mother approached to thank us again, even though we repeatedly told her we merely did what anyone should do. My father secured a position at a local hardware store 6 months later, and watching him learn to operate a cash register and engage with customers about power drills was surreal after years of him sequestering himself in his office. My mother still struggled more, and some days she could not leave the house. But she began attending a support group for survivors of religious trauma, and last week she actually went grocery shopping alone. Daria Saeed hosted us for dinner every Sunday, and watching Ramona Lang and me converse silently across her table while enjoying her famous pot roast felt so normal now, even though a year ago we had done so in secret terror. We had taught Daria Saeed's daughter, Ilara Saeed, our old secret signs, and she had added her own. And sometimes the 4 of us would engage in entire conversations without uttering a sound simply because we could. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, and learning that my story in a newspaper had apparently aided a girl in Texas whose parents imposed similar rules gave me a sense of profound connection. She wrote that I had given her hope that life existed beyond those walls. I immediately wrote her back, sharing information about the Advocacy Center and providing resources, and Daria Saeed helped me establish an entire correspondence program for isolated children reaching out. Standing on the University of Michigan campus that next autumn, my acceptance letter in hand felt impossible. But there I was, with Ramona Lang waving from Daria Saeed's car, and my own dormitory key, and a class schedule that included Introduction to Social Work, because perhaps I could help other children trapped behind windows. I was no longer that girl watching life unfold from afar, and I was no longer even the girl who ran outside to save someone, because now I was simply Maya, and that was enough. As I walked towards the registration building, I did not look back once.